I gave this talk, I think, sometime last year, actually, John. I think maybe the end of last year, and actually worked out that very quickly the slides that I have probably too long, and the Q&A was probably too short. So I've adjusted it. So what I've asked, well, what I would say is, if you've got questions you might want to ask as we go along, absolutely chip in or save them to the end, and I will stay on for Q&A as long as I have to if you've got specific questions. And what I would also say is, if you've got any questions that you would rather not be on the recording, then absolutely save them to the end, and we'll pause the recording, Richard, at the end, and then people can stay on and ask questions if they need to for privacy reasons. I'm absolutely happy to do that. And obviously anything you say today is only for today's call, so please do ask anything you need to get the best you can out of it. But I'll start anyway, because it's really important, I think, to know that in today's world, we're in lockdown mode now, and there's a sort of a general belief, I think, that the whole world's changed, which it has in some respects, but in others it hasn't. Online crime is worse and bigger than ever, and it hasn't really stopped. So unfortunately, this is one area which we can't really ignore. I started a company called Tech for Parents quite some time ago, and my concept was to help educate parents in the sort of ways of technology that their children were rapidly gaining the foothold on. And if that's still the case with you or your spouses, then this is the sort of area to come to and try and get information about not necessarily learning a new skill. You don't need to become IT experts, but certainly just enough to be a tech savvy parent, as I call them. So that's what the aim of the sort of the entity is. Today I'm going to cover 5 subjects, but I say it'll be a bit of a rattling through area, certainly enough to stir the thoughts for all of us and what to think about going forward. Slides, very happy to make them available, as they'll be on the talk anyway, but very happy to make them available as well if you wanted to have a copy of those. Well, a little bit lockdown during learning during lockdown, and John, if I get anything wrong in there as far as the school's concerned, please do chip in. But then we'll look at social networking, parental control, screen time, 2 key areas I think for today, and also still look at a bit of cyberbullying and how we can make sure we detect what's going on in that area. As I say, any questions along the way about anything, please do chime in and ask. So Ofcom's media literacy study, they do it every year and let us know in the industry what's happening. But this figure of 70% is going up, not down, which is why I'm sort of more distressed about my sort of role in Tech for Parents than ever before. And certainly within lockdown, I think anyone with a child who's got technology at their fingertips, which I'm imagining is probably 99% of them, in the age bracket of 12 to 15, is probably getting further and further behind, because the kids are obviously really increasing their learning capacity for online and social connectivity. But as far as lockdown during learning during lockdown, I think we've done this now for some time, so this may not be as pertinent as it was. So I'll rattle through some of the points, but some of them will still jive with some people. I think it's really quite important to start with yourself as a parent. We certainly took a few days at the beginning just to sort of work out how we as parents were going to work from home, my wife and I, and still try and educate the children and what was important. And I've got a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old, so very, very different parenting needs as far as education goes. One obviously is in year 7 at the very beginning, and one is very, very close coming up to GCSEs, and therefore at a very critical time. So quite a challenge to work out how to do it differently for them without seeming prejudice to one child or the other, which has always been a challenge, I think. And I think the school were very on the money when they told us, really, don't try and recreate the school schedule. Don't have them sort of doing biology for 40 minutes and then going on to a physics class or a maths class or whatever it may be. So a lot of what we needed to do was to work out what was the most appropriate thing for our children. So I'm following the school advice on that, very much so. We've had this time now, but certainly even now, I think worth time to readjust to any new regime. So it may be that you've tried a certain regime, it hasn't been working, you're going to try something new, but you have to remember to give that time to bed in and adjust to it, rather than trying to change it and assess it almost immediately. So you've almost got to give it time to work its way through. But I think we've kind of got through that now. I hope most of the children have got a sort of new routine of what they're currently doing. Obviously, it's such a difficult time. If you've got a garden and you've got some outside space, at least you can enjoy some fresh air and some sunshine. now that lockdown's being eased, I know people are traveling more, but certainly for those that have got more restrictive ability to have that sort of space and that traveling ability, it's important to sort of make sure that children are in a safe and relaxed space. If they're het up and they're anxious about anything really, it's probably not the best thing to do to launch into a maths lesson. It's probably better to deal with that issue first as parents, and then then come back and do the routine second. That's probably really quite a crucial thing at the moment. I think the school were very clear on focusing on the core subjects. It's absolutely crucial. We certainly, with our 12-year-old, it's all about maths, English and reading. That's almost all he's doing, which is great. But what I would say, and I'll come on to that in another point, is learning isn't just the books. There are loads of other sources of learning which we can obviously tap into, and most of us probably are. Absolutely encouraging exploration and reading. We're looking at trying to do a project a week. So I've tasked him to find something new to do each week that we've never done before, and both he and I, my son and I, are having a crack at that. My daughter is certainly taking up sewing in a much bigger way than she used to. She's done textiles at school, but she's done cushion covers and made dresses and t-shirts and Lord knows what else, just as a sort of extra projects for the learning, for the task, and for the change of dynamic, if nothing else. So it's not all about the books. And also, I'm learning this myself, actually. Our children are experiencing a whole new relationship with the internet that we would never have given them and they would never have had. So they are exploring and learning an awful lot more about themselves and about their technology than we would give them credit for ordinarily as parents. So rather than discouraging too much tech at the moment, we're sort of encouraging it, certainly from our household, encouraging more of it, but in a more appropriate way. So we're saying, well, we can look on Google for that, and once we've found the facts, we can go and fact check them. And once we're happy with the facts, we can then move on and do something else. We don't stay on the screen for too long. So we're using it as a tool. It's there, and it's there in a big way. But yeah, rather than discouraging it, we're almost encouraging it to a point where they want to put it down themselves, which has been great. Social connection's been absolutely key. I think we've all got kids with different social phobias or social needs. Some are so outgoing and gregarious, they need to connect all the time. Some are very shy and find it difficult to connect. So I hope that we've all found some way of getting technology to help in that respect. But sometimes we know we can't substitute physical connection. So that's something, I guess, that as parents now, it's another challenge to take on, which is how do we now orchestrate friends to get together? Which friends are in the six, not in the six? Is that going to create tensions between who's not in the six and who is in the six, if there's a group of friends that have to split themselves up? So again, we're gonna have this for many more weeks to come. I think we've heard that from the government, but it's going to be a different evolving sort of structure. So as far as we try and do kids desperate to get outside and meet their friends, we've obviously got to keep that balanced with schoolwork as well. Conflict between siblings is been there since time immemorial, I think, and also between parents and children, especially of certain ages. So we've had to actively encourage people, kids in our household, certainly if they got an issue, to say it rather than just let it boil away in the background. I know my 15-year-old just got so into her schoolwork at the beginning. We were blown away with how much work she was getting done, and the school were providing that for her. So she was really encouraged by that. And then there was a slump, and there was an absolute definite 3 days where she almost did no work at all because she had almost burnt herself out, and we hadn't realised. So we had to then have that conversation that said, look, we need to check in with you. How's it going? Are you really okay with it? Is there too much? Is there not enough? Talk to your teachers. This is what they're trying to encourage them to do. The school are obviously supporting that. Mental health is a separate issue. We always look at that in some sort of amalgamation of other things: physical health, mental health, mental health and screen time. But actually, just, is everyone in a good place or not? How scared do you feel going out to the supermarket or not? We've been out, certainly my son and I, and managed to do a supermarket trip, but we did the hand sanitizer, we wore the masks, we sort of did the thing where we said, look, you can't take risks. So mental health is obviously an issue for all of us in different respects, but certainly start with yourself as well. Make sure you're in a good place. Look for yourself first before you look after others. It's been a message I've always had all my life. This is a really tricky one sometimes if you haven't got a huge space in your house to do this, or their bedrooms or wherever it might be, but try and set up a learning space that it's the same space. because that will breed that familiarity with the children, so they know that when they're going into that corner of the dining room or whatever it might be, or on the table and the laptop is out, that's working, and then when it's packed away, that's not working. So they can definitely have some delimitation between when they're learning and when they're not. So it's not just a sort of it's always there mentality, because that can then play away with their mindset as well, which is that, oh, I haven't finished that homework, or I haven't finished that homework, and it's nagging away at them. So if they pack it away and say, we'll come back and do some more later, that's a better way of separating their day out for them and managing their time spans. Keeping talking obviously is one that's crucial. We've certainly got a teenager that is difficult to talk to, finds it difficult to talk to parents, but and we're trying again in lockdown to find new ways of breaking through that. And also it's probably one of the things where, you know, we've never been through this before. Unless anyone else was alive during the Spanish flu, we've all experienced something absolutely unique to us. So we're all learning quite a lot about ourselves and how we're adjusting to that. So we're sort of taking some heart in the fact that actually, you know, this has presented an opportunity to, you know, uniquely spend an awful lot of time with your children and yourselves as a family unit and learn far more about yourselves. But I would say, in echoing what the school has said, and certainly what the governor has said just the other day in a letter, which is, you know, if you need to, reach out and ask for help, not just from companies or from people offering services like mine, but certainly just from parents or from your own friendship group and family, and just, you know, be prepared to say, I'm really struggling with this idea of trying to work from home. Who's got any tips on how I do this? And if the answer is, oh, you know, set up a new Wi-Fi network with a virtual private network, just go, whoa, hang on a second, how do I do that even, you know? So prepared to ask for help, and certainly the school have been great in providing that sort of how-to with technology, with Teams and how to get on board with it. And the children already know about Insight and all the other sort of bits and bobs, but just how to get the extras in there. Lots of in the press about Zoom and the security of Zoom. I've had all my clients been asking about that, and it's the same stock answer really, which is all platforms are inherently insecure. All platforms can be hacked by somebody who knows how to do it. But what's the message you're doing? What are you using the tool for? And is the risk appropriate for what the risk? Sorry, is the material and the conversation appropriate for what risk might be posed? If you've got a very sensitive nuclear government conference call, I wouldn't probably do that on Zoom, but anything else I probably would, just about. So, you know, it's that kind of level risk-based approach. Okay, I'll let the rest of the school, because the learning bit is far more about the school, but that was just my sort of take on what we've sort of experienced so far. But moving on to social media, they have all experienced huge amounts of additional accounts. So unfortunately, what happened in lockdown seemingly around the world is that every child became 13 all of a sudden, because the number of new accounts was far exceeding the standard monthly incremental new accounts for anyone in the right age bracket for the main platforms. But YouTube at one stage was seeing something like a 200% increase in traffic, which is phenomenal for YouTube if you think how big YouTube actually is. Snapchat is off the scales and had huge amounts of new accounts being created, and also Instagram. What I would say with the last two, though, is a word of warning, is the ability for people to write software that automatically creates an account on a platform like Snapchat and Instagram is sadly too easy. And they can do this in numbers that would make your eyes water. I'll give you an example. On Facebook alone, since lockdown, they've estimated that they've removed well over 10 million separate accounts which are fake or fraudulent, which means they weren't created by people, because people can't do that fast. They were created by software, and software that's quite sophisticated. So it steals first names and last names from somewhere, so it comes up with a relatively believable name. It will steal someone else's profile picture, put that profile picture in, and then start trying to friend people. And sadly, people will go, "Oh, I've had a friend request from, you know, John Smith. I'll accept that," not knowing that John Smith's only got one post and 400 friends. And what John Smith's account really is a harvesting account. It's an account they're just trying to sweep up loads of connections and do the standard sort of social engineering tools and techniques that people use in that area of hacking and spamming and phishing. And the last figure I saw the other day on the spamming side, there's been an awful lot of other stuff removed on other platforms, but certainly I think Facebook said it was 10 million accounts and it was 6 billion and that's with a B. 6 billion pieces of spam have been removed since that lockdown had started, and that was a few weeks back now, so God knows what number it is. And these are all these accounts posting, and they're posting to adults, and they're posting to children, and they're posting disinformation, and buy your masks here, buy your hand sanitizer there, and this is the sort of opportunism that kids are being experiencing. So we still have to be very vigilant about these sort of main platforms, but also all the others as well, and WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter. They're all on that sort of list of the apps that children use predominantly for their communication. But the top three, I think, take the biscuit. Between certainly my daughter, YouTube, Snapchat, and Instagram is almost all she ever uses when she's socially connecting. The age limits haven't changed, as I said, but somehow all our children became 13 because the number of accounts on Instagram were going through the roof, and Snapchat. But it is worth remembering that these are the guidelines. It's not legally enforceable, but these are the guidelines. I can hand on heart say both my children have WhatsApp. Only one is nearly 16, one is only 12, but they also have it in a very controlled way. It's not a question of anyone can WhatsApp my son who's 12. Only the family members and his friends can WhatsApp him. That's something we actually do to actively parent that aspect of what he can do with it. So that's one thing. I think there's very low risk in that, but I wouldn't let him have Snapchat or Tumblr or Reddit or any of those pretty much other ones. He's almost beyond belief that his birthday's in July and he's about to get Instagram for the first time. So yeah, these are things that are landmarks, and they can be great when you get to there, and it can be something that's part of the sort of the birthday celebration, as it will be for him. But I'll come on to the slide actually in a minute, but it's worth keeping the boundaries of where the rules are. These are the vague list of rules that parents can keep to say, well, you can't have Instagram until you're 13 because that's what the rules are. But having said that, we know that about 3 out of 5 children have used social networking by the age of 10. More than half of them probably now would admit to just ignoring the age limits and subscribing themselves. And the age is getting less and less. So it's time to adjust our thinking. It's not time necessarily to completely restrict what children can and can't do. But I would, for those certainly with the younger children in year 7 and 8, try and discourage it as much as you can by not encouraging it. And what I mean by that is try not to create conflict by saying, no, you can't have that, no, you can't have that. That will create disquiet in the household, and I would then normally expect that child to work out how to do it themselves anyway, hence the ignoring the age limits. They'll set themselves up with their own accounts. It's probably better to try and deflect it by saying, yeah, you'll definitely be having Instagram when you're 13. Yeah, you'll definitely be having that when you're this age. And that gives them something to hang on to, I suppose. If you can get them to latch onto that as a thought pattern, then it discourages them from talking about it all the time and having it there all the time. Peer pressure is a nightmare, as we know, and that's something we have to deal with separately. But certainly from a point of view of mummy, when can I have, or when will I get Instagram? My son's beside himself because he's going to get it in a couple of months' time, but he's not going to get it the day before because that's what we said. We're going to stick to our guns on that one. But that's a younger boy. Certainly with teenagers, it's much more difficult because they are, they're fully formed young people. They're not necessarily to be treated like children. But I would say for parents still, I would encourage them to sign up to the same platforms. I wouldn't be happy as a parent allowing my child to go on a very new tool. Let's say they just developed Snapchat, and my daughter says, oh, can I get Snapchat? The first thing I do is to go, yeah, you can get Snapchat after I've checked it out. So I go online, I get a Snapchat account, I look at what's being posted, what type of, what temperature, if you like, I call it the temperature. What temperature is the app? Is it wild and sort of conspiracy theories and roastings, and is it not a particularly nice place to be? And I'd probably maybe put Twitter in that category some of the time. Or is it actually about supporting and reaching out and helping and communities? And you could put something more like Teams or sometimes Facebook could be in that category, where it's more about trying to encourage and help people and reach out. So adjust your thinking to the app based on what you feel the app is going to be like for your child. And then for your teenagers, follow their accounts. And I have put in there by stealth if necessary. It's a classic, isn't it, that you get the follow, And then after a while, you find out you're not following them anymore because actually they've removed you, but you didn't realise, and then they're off and running on their own on that platform. So it's worth something to just every now and again check in with yourself, check in with your teenagers' accounts, and if you're not following them on the basis that you're doing it for privacy, for protection only, you're not doing it to monitor them. Certainly we haven't got enough hours in the day to monitor our children 24/7, but we have got enough time every now and again just to sort of see that everything's okay. And what we use as a pointer for that is their behaviour. If there's a behavioural change in the family home, it's worth just thinking, hang on a second, I wonder if anything has come online that's upset them, especially if they're not talking about it. It can easily be something that they're experiencing online that they're not prepared to talk about, but you as a parent can detect a behaviour change there. And one of the worst things you can do directly to a teenager, I think as I experience it anyway, is ask them that question, has anything happened online? Because they're going to say no, for fear of you taking it away or being overly monitored or whatever. So it's something that you have to, and I'll leave this to you, but you have to find your own parenting technique for how you appropriately delve into your teenagers' lives just to make sure they're okay and safe. But I would say follow their accounts and just let them know that you're there, but you're not there all the time. So they feel supported in that, but that you also feel the ability to protect your own children online. And that's what one of our parenting sort of challenges has always been. Also worth talking to them if you can. Don't assume they're not posting or they are posting where everything's fine and everything's jolly online, because it might not be. So it is worth having that conversation if you possibly can. I appreciate not everyone will talk about it. And then there's obviously a need to develop in them their own digital resilience. And what I mean by that digital resilience is the ability to withstand the totality of what goes online. So if you're going into Twitter for the first time and you're a budding artist and you bring out a song and you post it on YouTube and you get loads of hits, and people say, God, this young child is, this song's brilliant. Have you seen this clip? And it goes viral. That's excellent. And then that will be really great. And their ego and their sense of well-being will be hugely developed by that, inflated by that. But then what happens in society, and I'm mortally sad of this, but it does happen in society, is the haters will start to hate, and some people will start posting very negative comments about that artist, either through jealousy or the trolling reasons, or just for their own warped sense of amusement. But they'll taunt people, and that's where the digital resilience comes in. That ability to say, well, look, these are genuine comments. These might be comments from a robot, a bit of software that's been developed just to keep pushing out this filth. It may even be real people, but you don't have to give them the same credence as everybody else. So it's about building that ability within a child to not take everything they're reading on their phone as absolute gospel and take it straight to heart, or put it through a filter first. So I encourage my son to do it. Put it through a filter first and work out who's saying it, why are they saying it, do I need to give this the same amount of credence as everything else I've been reading online? So it's worth having that ability to build up what we call digital resilience, that ability just to withstand what goes online and express it in terms that this is what happens in human nature. And sadly, it's online as well, and we can't stop it. So we certainly do that on a regular basis, just recheck in with ourselves and understand, and we have a little conversation when we bring up the word digital resilience, and we try and work out how we can encourage that on whatever platform. It could be on their phone, it can be on in schoolwork online, and it certainly could be on Xboxes and platforms like that. So it's everywhere, and it's a matter of building up within them that ability to emotionally rise above something before they then maybe settle into it, rise above it, look at it and think, okay, someone's got a bad opinion of my song or something I did or something I wore or a haircut I had, but I'm liking it, and enough of my friends like it that I know it's probably quite good. So we need to build that up within them. That's a muscle you need to sort of develop within your children, unfortunately, in today's world. And then finally, in this sort of area of trying to sort of gain control, parental controls are there for a really, really good reason, and huge amounts of money is poured into software these days, good software certainly, like Xboxes and PlayStations and mobile phones, to encourage and enable parents to protect their children online. But I can tell you absolutely categorically that far, far too many, and certainly probably more than that initial 70% of parents who are struggling with their children's speed of learning, I'd say it's more than 70% are not using the tools that are there. So part of what I want to do in this little section here is just show you that they are there and they're not too difficult to use. But these are the main 12 sort of key gospel messages really for parents, which is obviously knowing who children are friending online. And the general rule is still that for our 12-year-old, there has to be physical contacts other than the ones that we vet. So any celebrity accounts, no matter who they are, need to be vetted, because children might say, oh, can I follow a Blue Peter presenter? And you go, yeah, no problem, that's fine. A Blue Peter presenter is absolutely fine. And then you find out that if you go online and search for a Blue Peter's name, for example, on, let's say, Twitter or wherever it may be, you'll find the one official account somewhere, but you'll probably find more than 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 spam accounts with sort of very similar spellings or full stops in different places, and they're not the real accounts. If you were to search for Donald Trump on Twitter, you'd find hundreds of accounts with a name like Donald Trump, but there is only one account that actually is him. I'm not suggesting you follow him, but I'm just saying there's an example of huge amounts of other accounts that are purporting to be that person. So worth knowing that they physically are following who they need to follow, or that you approve that the content of who they're following. Still a long time ago, antivirus programs came out, but still just make sure that you have got an antivirus program, because the programs you get these days include an awful lot of email filtering, spam filtering, protection against ransomware, protection against trolling. Lots and lots of tools are now in that one package that used to be antivirus. One thing is a bit of a bounce back, really, which is if you are struggling and you know your kids know more about it than you do, try and express an interest in what they know and ask them to teach you, and almost make a game of it. How rubbish is mum at doing Instagram? Oh, mum, let me show you how you do the filters. Let me show you how you do this. That will encourage them to share more with you. I guarantee if they've got some engagement in the fact that they know more than you do, but you're willing to engage with them, that moment in engagement is an ability for you to understand. So if you do that, then how do you do that then? And well, how does that happen then? How do you screenshot a Snapchat, and then how do you repost that? Oh, okay, so that can be done, and this is all information for parents, which is useful. Security settings are something we will come on to, but just absolutely make sure security settings and everything these days are there, but we need to make sure as parents that we know they're there and we actually use them, whether it's on a PC, a gaming machine, an iPad, a phone, Android phone, or an iPhone. They're all there. This is part of the digital resilience as well. Is obviously encouraging children to know that not everything they read online is true. And if you want a better example than that, then do some sets, show them some of the stuff that Trump comes out with, because, it is a bit sort of galling to hear what he's saying, but we know half of what he's saying isn't true. So, and factually not true. So it's worth just using that as a good example of how to fact check. Age ratings. The PEGI ratings have been out for quite some time now. They're not really as widely believed, or should I say followed and adhered to, as maybe like cinema ratings for films and movies. I don't think many of us would get our 12-year-olds an 18-year-old DVD called 50 Shades of Grey, for example, and say, hey, get your friends around and have a movie night. But I know friends of mine who've got 12-year-olds that are playing Call of Duty, which is a grotesquely graphic computer game, which, if used correctly and by an adult, can be entertaining in some sense, or even beneficial, if you're in the armed forces, I guess. But for sheer entertainment for a 12-year-old, absolutely not necessary. Expectations and time limits will come onto screen time, but absolutely set expectations and time limits. This is the key one for me. If you do have that ability to know the platforms that your children are on and use them, then knowing how to block people that you might feel that you need to block is absolutely essential for parents. Almost every one of those apps now has a block ability, be it Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram. They all have the ability to block somebody, and not necessarily permanently. You can do it for a period of time. So if your children, if you need to call them off somehow, or getting particular grief from a particular child, maybe there's a spat going on online, might be better for you as a parent to say, hey, why don't you just block them for a bit? Just take that heat down for a bit. That may well be something you can use. Internet filters absolutely are on your router. I guess most of us have got a BT or a Virgin or a Sky or a TalkTalk router. all the major platforms will have filters on there that you can use to make sure you restrict as much as possible access to adult content that children shouldn't be seeing. Also worth mentioning, again, we keep saying this forever and a day, I don't think we'll ever really stop, because privacy becomes something that just, again, it morphs into another a realm each time you achieve something. So be careful what you share online as far as birthdays and postcodes and names and pets and everything like that at all. Reporting problems on social media is also quite crucial for parents. There are report buttons and report links everywhere now. They're very next to the block. You've normally got report this post and then block this person or something in the same sort of same area of the screen. So whether it's a menu or a button or something, they're normally very close to each other. But the one thing you can do if you have to is go to CEOP. CEOP is the government's body for monitoring child safety online, and anything you want to report to them, they will follow it up physically. They have to follow it up physically. So that's always worth doing. And again, just a plea to ask for help if you are struggling with any of these, because it's an awful lot to take on there for parents. Ask for help, look for help first. I mean, for example, if you were looking for help with anything to do with Xbox, go to Microsoft's website. They have got hundreds of web pages trying to talk you through how to do what you need to do for settings and how to secure things. So it's worth looking in there. Very, very briefly, we'll just go on to this bit you can do. If you've got a BT router, as I have as an example, it's worth setting up time when you are when your devices are not online, not available to the child. There's a huge difference within our children's mental map, if you like, when it's something that's there and could be had, something that's not there and can't be had. And if it could be had but is being denied, that's a much different concept to not being available. So as an example, I've got this little graphic here that just shows you literally just log into your router, and if you've got shame on you if you've got it, but shame on you if you've got the same password that you were set up with, which I don't have because I changed it. You just put that password in and then you change it to another password that you as an adult know and your child doesn't have the ability to read and change. But you can then go into your controls and you can set up different devices for access at different times. I mean, this is a very, very quick video, but it may just take up too much time. I literally go into advanced settings. You go to something called BT Access Control, but I think they'll all have something that's similar to this. And then you can select the particular device that you've got on your network. So if you want to say to your child, look, absolutely, you can have some Xbox time, but I think you're only going to get 3 hours a day, and between these hours, then you can restrict that. And you can do it on the router. So it wouldn't stop them playing a game on their own, for example, but it would stop them connecting over the internet to somebody else. So you might say, if you've got some game time, absolutely, you can have a couple of hours online, but you shouldn't have all that time online with your friends. You should be able to vary that. So it just shows you how easy it is. These menus are really simple. What day, what time, start and end. You save that, and in the table below, you can see that's now set on the router. So you don't have to worry about that. That's there then forever. And you can then, whatever parenting story you want to tell your child about why it's there, you can say that's what we agreed, and then you leave it there, and they will very quickly get used to that, and they will very quickly adjust to that. So once you set it up, these are what I would call your bedrock of security. So you've got that ability to say, well, it's there, isn't it? I'll quickly rattle through these. So I've got no affiliation with any of these companies, but Q Studio is one very good example of parental software for phones. It will help you monitor screen time. It will help you protect them against certain applications. You can obviously protect them from downloading apps they shouldn't have. So, for example, my children will come to me and say, can I get this app or this game? And they ask that physically because they know that I'm going to check it out and see how age appropriate it is. But then I have to unlock their phone with my phone to allow them to install applications. And it does. The ease of it is so amazing. I just literally tap on my own app and say, yeah, allow Sam to install this game. And that game he can then install, but that doesn't allow him to install any other game. So very simple, very much under my control, but very much part of our dialogue now as a family. It's not strange for him to come to me and ask that question. He doesn't feel restricted by having to ask that question because he asks it an awful lot, a lot of the time. And I look at the app and say, yep, you can have that one, or no, you can't have that one. And he'll say, oh, but it's a free game, Daddy. And I'll say, yeah, it's free because it's full of advertising. So sometimes I'm encouraging him to get the paid for games rather than the free games because they're full of advertising. And if you're on a Mac, for example, there's an app called Content Barrier. That's a different type of app because it works on a Mac, not on a PC. But their Mac controls are there as well. I use this particular one. It's not my plug for it, but I use this one called Hour Pact. I've used it from the beginning, so I'm not going to change now, but it's very simple, very helpful. Setting up screen time windows when they can and can't have access to their phones and their apps. But these are the sort of things we're trying to do. We're trying to just gain a foothold in protecting our children online, which then encourages them and allows them to grow as much as possible, as much as we want them to online, with the structure and the boundary around the outside of it. And that they are things like blocking certain apps, blocking the internet at certain times, screen time allowances. Once they know the bedrock of that, they'll work out within themselves how to get the most online time they can within these rules and structures. But if these rules and structures aren't there, then they will just have free access to the full auspices of the internet all the time. And I know it's going to be hard to take it away when they've already got it, but it's something where you almost have to just sort of redraw a line if you need to. But I've done this from day one, and it's now not a strange question in our household for my son to say, can I have some more Xbox time? Because he's asking for what he wants. It's a question then to have to say, well, yeah, you can have an extra half an hour now, but you'll need to do a bit more reading later. So he already gets into his head that he's now buying his screen time with other activities. And that's something that's a discipline that he's built a muscle within himself now, where he'll come and say, Daddy, if I go and read my book for an hour and a half after lunch, can I have an extra half hour with my friends online playing Fortnite tonight? Of course you can, absolutely. Well done. And actually I'll give you an extra hour because you've asked for it in advance, so that he sees a benefit and a reward from that, rather than it just being there and being on all the time. Most, if not all, of these functions are available on Android phones as much as they are on iPhones. I've only been an iPhone person, but I know I've got an Android phone for work, so I know these are there. But the ability just to say, okay, you may be within your screen time, but if you're using all your screen time on Instagram and not on a variety of applications, then that might be, again, a trigger for you as a parent to maybe look at their phone and say, I need to just check up on what's happening. And I'm saying, I might just check myself then, when I say look at their phone, one of the crucial things we have in our house, which I purchased online, it wasn't that expensive, it was £50, but it's a charging station that takes, I think, 5 or 6 devices. And now we as a family all put our devices on there at night time to charge. No one has them in their bedroom to charge. And because we do it as parents as well, our children almost couldn't argue against that. So we've certainly done that as parents, and that's where we all charge our devices. So when and if and should we want to check our devices, our children's phones, we have the ability to do that. And one crucial thing I would say, and certainly for me is the bill payer for some time to come, is that I have access to my children's phones, be that through thumbprint or the passcode, and that won't change until they're paying the bill themselves and they're adults, which will be 18. And they might not even be paying you for it then, they might just be adults. But certainly up until that age, we've absolutely cleared a line that says, it's my phone you're using because I'm paying for it. So you've got to break down that barrier of, here you go, here's a phone, it's yours forever, I'll never check it, to somewhere between that, which is for safety's sake, and when things come up, I can only as a parent deal with what I'm being told or what I'm learning about you. And sometimes when you don't share, I might need to just check on your phone, make sure everything's okay. If you can break down that barrier to a middle ground, they will live within that, rather than the far outside, which is I'll never check it, or the far other one, which is you can't have a phone at all. So somewhere in that middle ground is where you've got to find the spot for your own children. So with that, the Apple infrastructure, you can use downtime for screen limits, you can use app limits themselves down to each level of application or by each group. So you can say, you can have 5 hours on your phone each day during lockdown, but only an hour on games, only an hour on social. So give them that structure, give them that background, and give them applications that they always are allowed, even when their phones are outside of screen time. So they can always have text messaging if they need to for school, or Teams, or whatever that application is, you can do that. And then you can obviously restrict the content. And again, these are on Android as well. So you can certainly find these on the settings and use them, and on Xbox as well. There are different settings on there as well. So I definitely encourage, if you haven't seen these screens before or know that they're there, just go through the settings on the Xbox, get your children to do it with you, and they probably know it's there. So once you go through that question of, well, show me how that works then. Oh, you seem to have access to everything on the internet. Well, that's probably not appropriate, is it? So you can have that conversation, And weirdly, they'll agree the rules with you there and then, because they'll actually be showing you how to do it. I've gone a bit longer than I should have done, really, because I want to allow more for Q&A, guys. But just also with screen time, know that screen time expands exponentially when you look at all the devices that have screens these days. I mean, I think even my coffee machine's got a screen on it. So it's one of these things where you almost want to sort of just take a check and make sure they're not going from Xbox to phone to TV as 3 separate activities. That's all counting for screen time. And the concept, certainly within lockdown, we've tried to encourage, as I said at the beginning, is other activities that aren't to do with screen. So try to get out in the garden or reading or some other activity that might be useful to them that doesn't involve a screen, without necessarily restricting it completely. And this area is confusing for me, as it is for all of us as parents, because 2018 up to that sort of point, certainly the whole of the industry was just growing in evidence about how bad screen time was for our children. It would mean more insecurity, more depression, and it was all down to screen time. But I think what they were doing was seeing that screen time was increasing, and therefore it was a case of that this must be go hand in glove. By 2020, we can now go forward and say, actually, they're now saying there's very little evidence between screen time and well-being of children. There are other pointers that are exacerbated by the fact that they're online and they're able to share and monitor this. It's not actually the driving force behind it. So there's an awful lot of studies still going on, still trying to understand, is it something that is about behavior? Is it about online behavior? And does that then mean screen time? Because it's not the time you spend on screen. If you spend good quality time on screen, and a lot of it, unfortunately, my job, I actually spend almost all my day on screen because I'm working in IT, but it's constructive work. I take regular breaks. So it's what I would call good screen time, good quality screen time. The volume isn't the issue there. It's about the quality. So if I have a long document to read, I'm there on screen, eventually my eyes will just pop and I'll say, I can't do this anymore. I'm trying to read this 40-page contract. I just can't do it on the screen. Versus children are spending maybe less time online, but it's all in sort of Snapchat rooms or something, and it's all about, you know, backbiting and slagging people off, and that would be so detrimental to their well-being, even though it might be less screen time. So it's about that quality and not thinking it's only about the volume itself. So worth keeping on the news for this when you see it popping up about anything to do with this. I certainly do, and the studies. It's like this thing with, you know, eat chocolate, don't eat chocolate, drink red wine, don't drink red wine. It's have screen time, don't have screen time. So obviously clear as mud. And just to finish on the fact that, as I mentioned, I've sort of actually dropped it in earlier anyway, with the number of accounts that are being created, but unfortunately it is still out there. So there is still a need to be aware and protect our children from online bullying. It will go on. Children will be children and adults will be adults. And unfortunately there are enough bad ones on there online to always be doing it. So I'm still conscious of any issues around body image, around any sort of cult messaging that might come online on social media, and make sure that my child isn't struggling with that kind of attitude towards herself online. And look out for these apps they're using. I'll absolutely know that I've seen Omegle on one of my daughter's histories of her on her laptop, so I know that she'd access that site at some time. That's an 18-year-old site only and older. It's meeting strangers online. There are lots of apps now and video online where you can join, subscribe, and then randomly be attached to another person somewhere in the world which you're meant to have a conversation with. These are unfortunately great in their thinking about how they might improve the world's communication, but then the level of society that then decides to make bad use of those tools, find them, discover them, and then turn them to their own means. So these are all the sort of platforms that most people are aware of, where the darker areas of the internet are. Still ways to remember to be hacked. Messages are still going around with malware in them. We're now seeing malicious mobile apps more and more. It's worth looking into. Text messages. I still get text messages every week telling me to click a link and I've won a prize or whatever it might be. They almost stand out to me now, like so obviously, that they're some form of phishing, or smishing is text phishing, so that's a different word there. That's gone away, thankfully, the physical threat of having your devices stolen, but that can still be there, and hopefully we're not using insecure Wi-Fi networks because we're all at home. So that's still worth being there. I'm going to rattle through the last few just to get to the Q&A, because I know that these are going to be available, but just the sort of golden rules to sweep up what we've been talking about really, which is talking to your children about IT, especially if you know less about it than they do. It's really worth giving them the upper hand and engage with them, but understand that privacy is a sliding scale. You know, more flexibility, less flexibility, more privacy, less privacy. So you've got to find the spot that works. Difficult, I know, but peer pressure is there online, and it's worth keeping your boundaries and worth trying to find the way of expressing it, the one that isn't antagonistic to your children. Certainly knowing the landscape of who they're friending, and that there is some sort of form of screen time protection for them that is, again, that bedrock. It's not, I'm not saying it every day, it's bolted into the phone, how much screen time you've got. As an example, I've given my son 3 hours of screen time a day during lockdown, which is more than he usually gets, certainly not on a weekday, and he has 4 hours at the weekend, but he decides when to use that near enough. So if he wants to go online and do 3 hours of Xbox in one session, that's it for the day then, and he knows that. And he's learned very quickly how to ration himself. But I'm not going to change the 3 hours. That's something that, you know, we've got. And back to my previous comment, unless he asks for more time, and then we can trade off. We can say, okay, well, yeah, I can give you a bit more time, but what are you going to do for it? The golden rule is no tech behind closed doors. This is difficult during lockdown. My daughter is working in her bedroom almost exclusively on a desk and her laptop and her phone. That's what she's doing and where she works. But crucially, the door's not closed. That's not allowed. So there isn't the sort of mum and dad bursting in and phones being sort of shoved under duvets and things. That isn't the attitude that we've got in our house, certainly, and I would really encourage you not to have that attitude when the tech is on, and stored away at night as well, not in the bedroom. And then really just a big plug for screen time. Again, it's all about trying to manage the volume and the quality. It's not just about the volume only, but just trying to make sure you've got the bedrock of restrictions that you need there. And there's a point of encouragement. If all of this is new and you've done none of this before and it all sounds like pie in the sky, it absolutely works. I guarantee you it works in a very harmonious way. I've been lucky enough to build it up from the bottom up before my children had phones, and this was always the way it's been, and it's never changed, so they're very used to it. But hopefully, if you have to go through this pain, it will be short-term pain for a very long-term gain. So even if your children are 12, 13, 14 now, it's worth having a conversation. 15, 16, much more different landscape. I appreciate that. They're almost adults, but they're not quite. John, that's a rattle through, so that nearly was an hour. I probably answered a lot of the Q&A along the way, but I said earlier, I'm more than happy to stay on now and have specific questions. So I don't know if everyone's on mute or if you want to, how you want to monitor the questioning, or whether it's on the chat window. I'm really happy to take any sort of specific questions.